Hey, what's up everybody? Welcome back to another video, and today I'm going to be giving you all my review of Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales for the PlayStation 5. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe to help support the channel. I really appreciate that. And with all that being said, let's get right into this review. And just a little quick heads up, I'm going to try to make this review as short as possible. And yeah, so let's get into this. So Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales. Okay, so the game for its story takes place 1 year later after the event of the first game, which was Marvel Spider-Man PS4. And at the end of that game, it was revealed to us at the end that Miles Morales actually gained the powers of Spider-Man because he was bitten by a radioactive spider at the end of the first game. And in the game's final DLC story, there is a cutscene at the end of the DLC story where you see Miles and Peter. They're on top of a very high building, which I believe was the Empire State Building or the Chrysler Building. I'm not sure which building it was. All I know, it was a very high building, and you saw how both Peter and Miles jumped off the building, and it cut straight to black, and that clearly showed us and indicated that Peter had began trading Miles, so that way Miles can become the new Spider-Man for New York City. And that's basically what this game is pretty much about. Like, this game, Miles Morales' standalone game, is basically about Miles Morales becoming his own Spider-Man and rising up to whole new villains and all that, and showing the world, or should I say, showing to New York City that he is ready to take on bigger things, and he wants to prove himself in this game. So that's basically what this game is about. And Peter Parker actually leaves New York City for a few weeks, and basically Peter leaves the city to Miles to look after. And, you know, while Peter's gone, you know, it's up to Miles to, you know, take care of New York City until, you know, Peter gets back home from Sokovia. Not Sokovia, what was it? It was Symkaria. That's what it was called. Because the reason why Peter Parker leaves to go to Symkaria is because Mary Jane has a Daily Bugle report that is being processed down there, and he goes to Sokovia, not to Sokovia, to Symkaria to help out Mary Jane with her work, with her report. So yeah, so you know, that's what Miles Morales is pretty much about. It's just him taking care of New York City, and you get to meet his friend Genki, which is a person that we did see in the first game, but we only saw him in one cutscene of the first game, and then we also heard from him in a few phone call conversations from the first game, like when you play as Miles, through the stealth missions. But in this game, you know, now this is Miles Morales' standalone game, you get to see much more of Genki, which is, you know, who is his best friend. And, you know, Genki, of course, already knows that Miles is Spider-Man, because it was shown to us in the trailers and in the showcases and all that, like the demos. It was shown to us that he already knows that Miles is, you know, the new Spider-Man. But unfortunately, while Peter is gone, Miles Morales encounters this new villain called the Tinkerer, and apparently the Tinkerer is the leader of this gang / group called the Underground, and they have programmable matter, which is a biotech that they use in order to, you know, power up their weapons and armor and all that type of stuff. They get to build any type of weapon they want just in the snap of their fingers, basically. Yeah, this leader of the Underground. And apparently Miles Morales also does encounter this other but this corporation called Roxxon. And they're this high-tech energy corporation, and apparently the Tinkerer, who was the leader of the Underground, apparently has a lot of beef with Roxxon. And, you know, it's up to Miles Morales to basically stop the whole feud between Roxxon and Underground while the two of them are going at war. So yeah, that's basically what this game is about. Okay, now let's get really into it. So the gameplay of Spider-Man Miles Morales. So Miles Morales he has a totally different play style than what Peter, when you compare the two of their play styles, Miles Morales, he plays as a completely different character, and I just love how Insomniac just goes into detail with that to show you that, hey, this is not Peter Parker. This is, you know, someone else, you know, who has a different set of moves, gadgets, powers, and all that. Because the thing, like, okay, there are two main reasons why Miles Morales plays differently from Peter Parker. Why they two of them play differently. So Miles Morales has two abilities that Peter Parker is not actually able to do. And Miles Morales, he has these two abilities. One of them is called the Venom Blast, where it's like this bioelectricity, like venom punch that he does, and you're actually able to electrocute enemies. You can, power up generators with his electricity and all that. All that type of stuff. Like his bioelectricity, venom powers, like they're very useful. And then Miles Morales also has the ability to cloak, which means he's actually able to go invisible and blend in with the environments and all that, so that way enemies won't be able to detect him. And yeah, so that's pretty much like the two main differences between Peter Parker and Miles Morales. And not only that, but they're web swinging. Like the way how Miles web swinging in this game, like the way how he web swings, it's a completely different style than what you're used to seeing with Peter. Because with Miles Morales, when he web swings, like his animations are like totally different. Because when he's web swinging, his arms and legs are kind of flaring all over the place. Whereas Peter, like when you're playing as Peter, like from the first game, you notice how like Peter, he's very coordinated with his web swinging. And you see how he like has like this like very straight and linear like launching and all that. Because Peter Parker, he's used to web swinging. He's been doing it for 9 years, while Miles Morales has only been web swinging for a whole year. And yeah, so he's still kind of getting used to the web swinging, like when it comes to like the calculations on when to, on when to shoot, his webs in order to sling, about his coordination. Like he has to still kind of master all that, which technically he does master it, throughout the game. So like, yeah, like at the end of the game, he is a complete boss with his web swinging. Like, and you notice that in the cutscenes and all that. So yeah, so like I like the fact of how like they have two completely different like styles, because like his arms, legs, they flare all over the place, but he's falling with style. That's the best way to describe Miles's web swinging, is that he falls with style. And Miles Morales also has a much larger variety of air tricks than what Peter had in the first game, because Peter only had like 5 air tricks, whereas Miles Morales, he has like at least over 10 air tricks, I believe. And there are actually secret air tricks that you can also do in this game that the game doesn't even tell you about. And now let's get into the hardware. So as you all know, the PS5, has has a faster, more powerful hardware than what the PS4 had, because the PS5 in general, it's just a powerful console. It's stronger than what the PS4 like hardware was. It has much more powerful graphics card. Like it has everything. Like the PS5, and you guys can check out my review too. Like I pretty much explained the PS5's hardware. But in Spider-Man Miles Morales, you get all new graphical features like ray tracing, and there's also you also have the ability to switch out, the options to switch out your frames per second, which means you have the options like on how smooth you want the game to run. So like you can have the game run at 30 frames per second in fidelity mode, and then you have performance mode where the game can run up to 60 frames per second, and then you have performance RT mode, which is where the game can run at 60 frames per second with ray tracing. And ray tracing is when you have reflective surfaces, like whenever you're like wall crawling on a building, you can see your reflection in the windows, like as you're crawling up a building. And yeah, so Spider-Man Miles Morales, like when it comes to its story, now I will say this, the story like is very short. Like the game has like for the story's length, it's at least 5 to 6 hours to beat, but like you make up all that time by doing like all like the side missions and everything around the city. Like when you collect these time capsules, You can also, you know, go around doing these friendly neighborhood missions where you basically go around Miles's new neighborhood, which is Harlem. You basically go around his new neighborhood and you can help people with certain, you know, missions that have to be completed and all that. So, like, you can, you know, like save someone from like being kidnapped or something like that. Like, basically like those type of things. And like, you can also help people, you know, like fix their water pipes and all that. Like, you know, stuff like that. You know, like that's why it's called friendly neighborhood missions. And you're able to do those type of side quests in Miles Morales. And it's like I said, you can collect time capsules. You can, of course, stop crime. You can also take down the underground bases and Roxxon bases. You can do all those type of side quests in Spider-Man Miles Morales. And in order to, like, to complete the game at 100%, like we complete all like the side missions and all that, the length for all that is basically up to 18 hours. So like you get like you get 6 hours at least like for the story, but when you like complete the side quests and all that, like all together, Spider-Man Miles Morales, the whole game in general, is 18 hours long, technically speaking. And the reason why, you know, the story's so short is, like I said, it is a standalone game, and Insomniac Games, the company who / developers who created the first Spider-Man game and Miles Morales game, they basically pulled the same move that Naughty Dog did with the Uncharted games, where a year later, after Uncharted 4 was released, they came out with the new Uncharted game called Uncharted: The Lost Legacy, and that was a standalone game. And the thing was, that game was not as long as Uncharted 4, so that's basically the same move that Insomniac pulled with the Spider-Man games, where Miles Morales' standalone game is not as long as the original Spider-Man game, which was Spider-Man PS4. But overall, the game as a whole is a really incredible experience, especially with the PS5's hardware and DualSense controller. Now, the DualSense controller really stands out in this game because the DualSense controller's haptic feedback and adaptive triggers. So, like, whenever you're web swinging around the city, you can really feel the tension of the web swinging. Like, whenever you shoot the web, like, it actually feels like you're shooting a web when you hit R2, because you can actually feel like a web being shot, like in the game. Like, you're basically feeling what Miles is feeling when he's web swinging. You can feel all the tension and, you know, all the altitude when he's web swinging. You can feel all that in the controller. And then you can feel the haptic feedback whenever you activate Miles Morales' Venom powers. And, you know, since his powers are bioelectricity, it really feels like a whole bunch of electricity is like crackling and kind of like, and, you know, kind of circulating in the controller. Like, you can feel all the electricity, you know, kind of like circulating in the controller, and it really feels like there's actual electricity like popping and crackling inside the controller. Like, that's how realistic this game is, and that's how immersive this game is when it comes to using the DualSense controller. And this game also does use 3D audio, because the PS5 now has 3D audio technology along with it, you know, since it's a next-gen console. But overall, Spider-Man Miles Morales is a really fun time, and you're gonna love its story. Even though it is a short game, you're still gonna make up all that time by doing all the side quests and all that. So if you do all that, it clearly makes up all the time that you're gonna make up. You know, it makes up all the time, you know, from, you know, having to do the whole story, because the story only takes 5 to 6 hours to beat. But yeah, but when you do all the side quests, you clearly, you know, you make up all that time. But yeah, so Spider-Man Miles Morales, I am gonna give this game a perfect score, a 10 out of 10. Because you guys already know I absolutely loved the first game. I thought it was great. It was a masterpiece. And Spider-Man Miles Morales, it also, you know, builds hope and builds up more excitement, anticipation for the future of the franchise and what they're gonna do with the series, and, you know, and how, you know, they're going to include Miles throughout the future games. And of course, you know, they are still going to explain, you know, Peter's story, because there's much more of his story left to tell. But it's just great having Miles Morales to be a part of that now that Miles Morales is his own Spider-Man, and that he is also different from Peter Parker, which is what I really like. And I like the fact of how this game really truly does a great job at showing that Miles is ready to come out of the shadows. Like, he's ready to step out of the shadows of Peter Parker, and he's ready to become the new Spider-Man and become his own Spider-Man and ready to defend New York City. And I was just very glad to say at the end of the day, it's also very, nice to say at the end of the day that Miles Morales is in fact Spider-Man. And that's all I have for you guys in this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed my review of Marvel Spider-Man Miles Morales. 10 out of 10. You guys should go play it. I highly recommend it. See you guys, and peace out.